Let's begin by that phrase that Dr. Fukuyama is best known for, and the ones that people use to kind of dismiss him whenever you listen to Francis Fukuyama. The people who do not read him well closely would say, "Oh, well, he's the end of history guy." Of course, it's a phrase that is, I think it was first attributed to Hegel, who believes that history follows a linear progress that sort of move forward and upward. And in 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell and all signs points to the end of Soviet communism, Fukuyama penned that article titled "The End of History?" question mark. And he proclaims the triumph of liberal democracy, at least over communism and other universal ideals. And 3 years later, of course, in 1992, he wrote that book that made him a household name, often, not for the best of reasons, The End of History and The Last Man. That is, even he himself acknowledged that people miss the last man part of the argument. Of course, that is a phrase attributed to Friedrich Nietzsche, another German philosopher. As far as I can tell, reading from Nietzsche, it means that a man without ideals who still has, who wants to have an ideals, but is want of something to fight for. So, and in a sense, Fukuyama's Last Man is a warning to liberal democracy in the future, in that this may be the final stage in the political evolution of political order. And so those who are living in liberal democracies will find themselves with nothing else to look forward to. Would that be a correct analysis?
Yes, absolutely. I would agree, because it's very important, two things that you said. The first thing that you said is that he put a question mark to the end of history. And that's important because, I mean, he doesn't say, and that's probably why he has been criticized and why people still use that phrase to just tell that he's naive, or that's not, how could you say that liberal democracy will be the preferred system all over the world, and that's not the case. So what he's saying is that so far, and even he does repeat that now, 20, 30 years later, liberal democracy is probably, until anybody comes up with a better idea, the best idea that we have ever found for political order and political systems. So he says that this is a system that has come to be, not by any plan, but it's turned out to be viable. It's turned out to be a system where freedom of the individual and respect of the individual is best contained. So that is a very important idea. Of course, it is also, if you look at it empirically, you find that liberal democracies, for economic reasons, and they have been having economic growth, and all those kind of things that you could also put onto it. But that's not, I mean, that could also happen to other political systems, that they will be able to have economic growth and so forth. But he says the important thing is the respect, and also the respect of freedom for everyone in that political system, both by enfranchising them and both by respecting and having the rule of law that treats people equally. And when it comes to Nietzsche, he adds that because that's also important in Nietzsche's thinking. And thinking, he's a pessimist, Nietzsche, but he says, and the idea that Fukuyama took from him was that you're correct. If you become complacent, if you don't, I mean, if you have a liberal democracy and you have nothing more to fight for, there's no wars, there's no conflicts, of big conflicts. Of course, you could always create smaller conflicts and you'll try to put your energy into that. But it's, he says that people have, at least some people will have an urge to compete in some sort of sense, to have something to strive for. And when he says that if you have kind of reached your goal, what shall he do? Where shall he go now? What shall he look at? And then it can deteriorate. And that's why liberal democracies can become more autocratic. They can become what Viktor Orban has said, a illiberal democracy, still keeping the democracy part, but not the liberal part. And I think that is something that Fukuyama saw already in 1992, and that he's repeated now in his new book, Liberalism and Its Discontents, that came just a month ago.
Yes.
So you're right. But yeah, it's very important to underline, and he does it all the time, and he's even tired of it. He says it's to say that the idea of liberal democracy as a goal or as an ideal political system, that is much more important than saying that all countries would be liberal democracies at some point.
Yes.
But you have to come up with something better. You have to come up with we have to prove yourself to have a political system that will perform even better than the liberal democracies over time.
Yeah. About
that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So far, I'm skeptical of whether or not a better system than, well, liberal democracy can be came up with, probably after our lifetimes. But so far, I believe 2/3 of the world are living under either an illiberal regime or an undemocratic regime, or a combination of both. And they are all, or at least certain factions of those countries, are leading or campaigning towards liberal democracy. Meanwhile, countries that are both liberal and democratic, they're actually taken several steps back, whether they are inching towards populism or autocracy. And that, of course, is something we are going to discuss shortly. But